Alright, so Genesis 15 through 17 today. Genesis 1 through 14, we saw God as our creator. He created all of the things forming the world with care and purpose, and we watched the rise and the fall of humanity, right? But out of that chaos, God called a man. His name was Abram, and he promised him that he would be a great nation. And yet time has passed. Sometimes when we read the Bible, we think everything's just happened the next day. But it's really been years, and we're going to talk about that today. And the promise that God made to Abraham has seemed to be unfulfilled. Okay? So Abraham kind of starts to doubt that God's promises will be fulfilled. So we're going to find out what happens when our fear starts taking control of our faith. Okay? So we are in Genesis 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward the heaven, number the stars if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. Okay? So Abraham's kind of having a moment of fear, and it's actually very justified, because what happened in chapter 14? And remember what we talked about last week and what Abraham did. Remember, he went to war with those kings to get Lot and all of the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah back. Well, do you think a man who did all of that, there would be some retaliation eventually? So Abraham's probably very afraid of those surrounding kings might come back and retaliate against him for siding with these other kings. So Abraham is afraid of what may come to pass after all of this. So he's kind of expecting an attack of retribution. And so he's afraid. And he's still waiting for this promise to be fulfilled. And so God speaks into his life and he tells him, Don't be afraid. I am your shield. You don't have to worry about human protection. I've already promised you what's going to happen. I'm going to take care of you. Okay? So Abram, as any of us would say, he says, But I'm still childless. I don't have anybody to take over. You're going to make me into a great nation. I'm one guy with one wife. How is this going to happen? And my servant is going to inherit everything if this doesn't happen before I die, right? Because he's looking at the situation. He's looking at the logical aspects of all of this, right? It just doesn't make logical sense, Lord. How am I supposed to be a whole nation when there's just us, okay? So God doesn't scold him. He takes him outside, and he's going to give him a sign. He has him look up into the bright sky and says, Start counting the stars, if you can even number them. We could be here for years, and you wouldn't be able to tell me how many numbers are out there. And he says, This is the sign. This is how many your descendants will be. So I'm reaffirming my promise to you. And something happens inside Abram. He finally just takes God at his word, even though it's not perfect obedience, as we're going to find out, and he doesn't even fully understand how it's going to happen. He just takes God at his word. If God says it, I'm going to believe it. And it is that God counts as righteousness to Abraham. Okay? So faith is just believing what God says, regardless of what we think about it, regardless of even if we can understand it. That is true faith, and that is what God counted to Abram as righteousness. Okay? So let's continue on with the story. Verse 7. Then he said to him, so this is God speaking to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to possess. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? He said to him, Bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And we go, are they going to have a barbecue? Like, what is with all of these animals, right? We're talking about that in a minute. And he brought him all of these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in the land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Then the sun had gone down, and it was dark. Behold, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of all the ites, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. All the ites.
Touche.
That's what Alan always say, and the mosquito bites.
And the mosquito bites. All of the ites around you, you're going to possess their land. Okay? So God reaffirms that it's not just a descendant promise, this is going to also include a land promise. All of the land that belongs to all of these other people is going to belong to your people one day. And Abraham asks, how is all of this going to happen? How am I going to know what you're saying is true? Okay? So God says, okay, I'm going to do this in a way that you will understand. We look back and go, I don't understand that. Abraham heard it and would have said, I understand. You're going to make a covenant with me. So we would say, if the Lord showed up to us today and wanted to do this, he would say, meet me at the lawyer's office, we're going to draw up a contract. Okay? So this is very much what Abram understood. So he takes these very specific animals and he cuts them apart and he lays them down on the ground in a very specific way. And what would normally happen in a typical contract is the two parties would walk between the pieces of animals. And you're literally saying, if I break this covenant, may I be like these animals. Okay? So it's like signing your name on the dotted line. I'm responsible for whatever the consequences are in this contract. Okay? So that's what Abram would have understood what was happening. But the Lord doesn't show up. Abram prepares everything and he sits and waits, and it's a long time and the Lord just doesn't show up. And so he's waiting. And he's waiting, and he falls asleep waiting. How many of you have ever fallen asleep praying? Okay, you're in good company. So it seems like the Lord isn't showing up for Abram, even though he's done everything that the Lord has asked him to do. Okay, so Abram falls asleep, and we get this callback to Genesis 2 when God put Adam to sleep to create Eve. Okay, so in this night vision and terror, Abram is afraid. We see him wrestling with the birds that are trying to take the pieces away, and that's how long this has been. That the birds have decided it's safe now, I'm going to come eat these pieces. So this is a long time that Abram's kind of sitting there waiting for this to happen. And he falls asleep and he starts having this nightmare and this fear come on him. And God speaks into that. I have a plan, not only for you, but also your descendants. Your descendants are going to go to a nation, and they're going to be servants there, but after 400 years, I will deliver them. So this is everything that he's telling Abram. But he says, you are going to live in peace, and you're going to die in peace. You're not going to be part of that, okay? And when I bring them out, they're going to come out with a great possession. They're just not going to be free. They're going to come out with their arms full of possessions because I'm going to take care of them, okay? And then what God does is very interesting. Remember I told you that normally both people in the contract would walk through the pile of animal carcasses. Well, God alone passes through these things because he is taking on the consequence of the contract by himself. So he's basically saying to Abram, this covenant rests on me. Doesn't matter if you fail because everything is going to ride on me. Okay? I will be faithful regardless of what you do in this partnership, even though I'm entering it in with you. Okay? So the promises and the consequences rest on God alone. Okay? And then he shows Abraham a vision of how he's going to lead this nation out of Egypt. He has a smoking pot that would have a pillar of smoke and a torch, a flame of fire. So we have the smoke pillar and we have a fire pillar that are walking side by side through these pieces in representation of how God was going to lead his people through this covenant. Okay? So I'm sure when Abram wakes up, he's probably just like, that was a crazy trippy dream, right? And doesn't understand any of it. But this is the promise that he is then going to pass down to all of his descendants and tell them about this dream and what God did that night. Okay? All right. So we think after Abram's heard all of this, that he's just going to walk perfectly and he's going to understand everything the Lord has for him and everything's just going to be great, right? Happily ever after is what we can put right there, right? No. Right. I don't know if you've read the rest of the story. That's what we're going to read right now. All right. Chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. As if we needed remembering, there are no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. Where did she get her? Remember when they went down to Egypt and they lied and then Pharaoh sent them away? Yeah, Hagar, that's where she came from. And Sarah said to Abram, "Behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go in to my servant, and it may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarah. Y'all, you got husbands, and what? Underline that sentence, okay? He listened to the voice of his wife. So Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan. Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she had saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarah said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you." We need to hand Sarah a mirror. "I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between me and you." But Abram said to Sarah, "Behold, your servant is in your power." You see the blame shifting going on. We have also a callback to Genesis 2 and Adam and Eve here. They're husband and wife fighting with each other. "Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going?" As if he didn't know. She said, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarah." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." The angel of the Lord also said to her, "I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Behold, you are pregnant, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand is against everyone, and everyone's hand is against him. And he shall dwell over against all of his kinsmen." How would you like when you were pregnant that the Lord came and said that about your son? Okay, so this is what she hears about her future son. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God of seeing." For she said, "Truly here I have seen him who looks after me." Therefore the well is called Beer-lahai-roi. It lies between Kadesh and Beer. Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abraham. All right, so now time has passed again after Abram's dream, and we still have no children, okay? We're still waiting.
I thought we just had Ishmael.
We're talking about recapping.
Okay.
Go back to 16:1, okay?
Oh,
So after the dream, there has been some time that has passed. That's okay, we're recapping. So this waiting has made Abram's faith kind of waver, kind of fear starting to creep back into Abram's life. So Sarah has a logical explanation. We have a logical solution to this problem. We don't have children? Great, I've got a woman servant. She's not doing anything. I can have children by her, because legally any children that would be given through her husband and a servant would be hers legally, okay? Because she owns this person. Anything that is reproduced by her, she would own legally, okay? So she makes a logical, plan here. God hasn't given me children. Maybe I'm the problem. We should help God out. We have this option here. That's very logical. We should help God out, right? God needs our help, obviously. It's just taking too long. So she gives Hagar to Abram, and Hagar becomes pregnant. But the issue here is that the solution that they came up with now becomes a source of contention and pain, because the minute that Hagar is convinced that she's pregnant, she starts despising her master, her mistress, okay? Because now she feels entitled. I'm bearing your husband's son. I have to get taken care of. I now become the passenger princess, right? You have to take care of me because I'm carrying your future, okay? So Sarah, feeling very mistreated, very regretful of the choices that she made, she lashes out on her husband, who turns around and lashes out on her, because this was your idea, right? Why are you doing this to me? This was your idea the whole time. And the whole thing just unravels. And Hagar runs away. She flees. She gets out of that situation because she just can't stand it anymore, okay? And when she's out in the wilderness by herself, completely unable to take care of herself, God sees her. And he doesn't just see her, he shows up for her.
I have a question. Why don't they just say the Lord instead of the angel of the Lord? What is the difference?
So we're going to talk about who the angel of the Lord is. And it seemed to be at this point, because Hagar is an Egyptian, she doesn't understand this physical form that is manifesting. And so angel just means messenger. And because he gives her a message, we kind of get this title of angel of the Lord.
Okay.
Yeah. So we definitely see this pop up when people don't kind of understand the form that God is taking.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do meet this angel of the Lord, who meets her there in a physical form. So in Genesis, we have a physical form of God. Who is it? Say his name. Jesus. We have incarnate, pre-incarnate Jesus, who shows up, okay? And he calls her by name. He knows her name. And he tells her, I am here to meet with you. And he gives her hope, okay? He blesses her and he prophesies over her. Okay, so this encounter isn't the only one where we're going to hear about the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. It strongly points to a Christophany, which is what we just call a pre-incarnate Jesus before the New Testament. This is not the last time we will see him in the story of Genesis, but it is the first time that he shows up. Okay, so he tells her she is going to have a son, which she would not have known because they didn't have ultrasounds back then. And that she is to call his name Ishmael. And Ishmael means God hears, okay? Because God has heard her. So Hagar, who is a slave and an outsider because she's an Egyptian, becomes the first person to give God a name. She calls him El Roy, which means God who sees me, not just hears me. The God who sees me. And there's also a well there that is named. The name literally means the well of the living one who sees me. Because she saw God, the living God who saw her. Okay, so that's what that well means. And he tells her something interesting. I want you to go back and I want you to obey your mistress, and I will protect you. Because if she were to go back, there was no guarantee that she was going to be protected by Sarah, by Abram, because they're in the middle of a battle between themselves. But the Lord promises her, if you go back, I will take care of you. I want you to obey. I'm calling you to obey in this instance. So Hagar returns, and everything happens just as the Lord said. She has a son, and it's Abram who verifies his name and calls him Ishmael. God has heard because he believes Hagar. Okay? So in this story, we see that even when people of the promise are acting out of fear and impatience, God is still going to act in grace and mercy. Okay? All right. So let's find out what happens. We're going to fast forward again.
It's kind of interesting that she was from Egypt. I mean, I just really find that fascinating how she was used in this situation, and then, I don't know,
It's very interesting that God doesn't tell him which nation his descendants are going to be in for 400 years, but which nation is it?
Egypt. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Very interesting, isn't it? Abraham would not have known that. God did not reveal which nation. All right, chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abraham, that is physical form, appeared to Abram, and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you, and your offspring after you, throughout your generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to the offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of the you sojourn in, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both he who is born in your house and he who is brought by your money shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be with an everlasting covenant. Any circumcised male who is not any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. All right. So Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. He was 86 when Ishmael was born to Hagar. So 13 years have passed since Ishmael was born, and Abraham is now 99 years old and still waiting for his son. Still waiting for the promise. And God shows up again in physical form. And this time, he's the one who introduces himself with a new name. El Shaddai, God Almighty, the one who can do the impossible. Because he is getting ready to fulfill his promise that he made so many years ago to Abram. Okay? So he reaffirms his covenant. How many times did you hear that repeated? Again and again. Do you think God's serious when he repeats himself? My covenant is with you, with your people after them. This is my covenant between me and you. I will be your God. You hear that repeated over and over and over again in that passage. And it's an interesting thing that he decides to change Abram's name to Abraham. So Abram means father. Abraham means father of a multitude. So he's going to get real specific here. He's telling Abram, this is getting ready to happen. I'm so confident that this is getting ready to happen, I'm going to change your name just to show you that I know what's getting ready to happen. Okay? And then he gives him a sign, a physical sign that's going to manifest in all of his people. Circumcision. Circumcision is physical, permanent, and deeply symbolic. It's a mark on their body saying, we belong to God. We are God's. Okay? We belong to God. All right?
Also, in the book of Paul, he talks about the spiritual circumcision. So
Yes.
connection.
So Paul is going to connect that physical symbol with the spiritual symbol later on. Yes, but this is not just, a spiritual act. This is a physical act. We are going to cut something off. And then when you jump down to verse 14, he says, if you don't cut it off, I'm going to cut you off. He's using the same language. If you do not get circumcised, I'm going to circumcise you from my people. Same word.
So, and it says, even if you buy a slave, a male slave,
Yes.
so regardless of whether they believed in God, they still had to be
Correct.
circumcised to
Yes. To be included in the people and counted among them. So this would have been a protection as well, marking them as they belong to us. And they are going to be underneath the protection and promises of our God. So yes. But it wasn't the only way other nations, when they had certain marks and stuff, they would mark them as their property. It was a sign of protection. So God is kind of playing on that symbol that other nations would use as well. They would brand people, unfortunately. But this is God's symbol of, I'm going to make you equal, so I'm not branding you as lower, I'm actually making you equal with my people underneath my protection. So this is the first time that we have a God who's creating equality between a master and a servant, using the same exact symbol. You come in, you are going to be equal with my people, regardless of your station. You're going to be equal in protection and promise. Yeah, so it's an incredible, beautiful picture here that we have of God. It's unlike anything of the surrounding nations that we have. So circumcision is very interesting. The timing of 8 days is something they would not have understood of why God chooses 9 days, but it has taken us a very long time to understand, but we finally understand why God picked 8 days. So we have an important blood clotting agent, vitamin K, is not formed until the 5th to 7th day of life. Okay, so that's one. And another blood clotting agent, and I'm not a medical professional, it's prothrombin, is at its highest level on precisely the 8th day of life. So we have 2 blood clotting agents that peak on the 8th day. Okay, something that they would not have known at that time. It was only God, the creator who formed the human body and everything in it, including this system, knows more about it than we ever will. And so he is the one who chose 8 days to do exactly what he expected of his people. All right, so let's read about the next birth that is going to happen after all of this. So just remember, y'all, Abram is 99 when he's circumcised. Okay? Poor guy. And all of those 300 plus men with him, he would have had to go to them and said, listen, here's what my God wants to do.
I wonder what
How many of y'all were signing up
I wonder
for
what their
this?
looks were. They're like,
Yeah. You want us to do what, sir? You want us to chop off what, sir? Excuse me, sir? I didn't sign up for this. Okay. Abraham had a lot of people in his little caravan here, and he would have had to go to every mountain. I know this is weird, y'all, but this is what the Lord has told me.
lots of wine to drink.
Lots of wine. We're going to need some antiseptic. We're going to need some painkillers. Listen, I'm 99. If I can do it, y'all can do it, okay? Yeah, that was what Abraham had to do. Would you love to be part of that conversation? All right, so after all of that happens, okay, verse 15. And God said to Abraham, as far as Sarai, your wife, so Sarah's not going to be discounted here, okay? As far as Sarah, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she will become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face laughing. Y'all, where do you think rolling on the floor laughing came from? Abraham laughed so hard that he fell on his face laughing. Okay. And he said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? He's rounding up. He's 99, but he's rounding up. Maybe his birthday was coming up. Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? She is well past childbearing age. Okay? He's 100. She's 90. She's done having kids. That's why he left. That's why he fell on the floor laughing, busting a gut at what the Lord is telling him. Okay? Verse 18. And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. I already have a child. Why can't all of this just happen through him? Okay? And God said no. It hurts sometimes when God says no. But God said no. But Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, who shall not be discounted, he's just not the promise. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. What does Ishmael mean? God hears. So he says, Ishmael, God hears. I have heard you, Abram. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall be the father of 12 princes. So that would be rulers in their area. He does actually then have 12 rulers. We'll talk about that later. That promise comes true. And I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you in this time next year. So he also puts a deadline on this miracle. This is going to happen. You will have a son by this time next year. Okay? Verse 22. And when he had finished talking to him, God went up from Abraham. Then Abraham took Ishmael his son and all those born in his house, or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day. What do we call that?
Obedience.
Obedience. He did not wait around. There was no discussion. We are doing this today, fellas. Okay? That very day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day, Abram and his son Ishmael were circumcised. Obedience, obedience, obedience. And all the men of his house who were born in his house, and those bought with his money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Here, obedience.
The 13, is that when?
Is that why bar mitzvah at 13?
13,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
Ishmael is 13 at this moment. Okay, so God changes not only Abram's name, but Sarai's name to Sarah, and confirms that she is going to have a son with Abram. Abram's 99, Sarah's 90. The idea of a child at this point just seems completely absurd. How is this even going to happen? And he forgot who he's talking to. He forgot he's talking to El Shaddai, okay? The one who can do the impossible. So God is not joking. He affirms to him, Sarah is going to have a son, and you're to name him Isaac. And Isaac means he laughs. Because what did Abraham do?
Isaac means what?
He laughs.
He laughed.
He laughs. Yeah, because Abraham laughed. He fell down on the floor. Like, I want you to get that picture. He didn't go, haha, that's funny. No, this man was on the ground laughing hysterically, okay? Just busting a gut at this. So it's a reminder of every time they would call Isaac's name that this promise that is getting ready to be fulfilled was completely laughable at the time. Abraham has waited nearly 25 years for God to give him a son. This is a long time to wait for a promise, okay? But God tells him, this time next year you'll have a son in your arms, and his name is going to be Isaac, okay? But God also doesn't forget about Ishmael. Ishmael is 13. He technically legally belongs to Abram. He blesses him too, but he tells him, covenant is going to pass through Isaac, not Ishmael, but I will take care of Ishmael. I will make him a great nation. He's just not the nation of promise, okay?
Do we
This
think
is
he did
not-
that because they kind of like backdoored having a child?
Yes, because it was their human effort,
Right.
not believing the problem is in disobedience. And that is the only reason why Ishmael does not get to be the son of promise. Yes.
Because they took it into their own.
Because God doesn't, plop a baby in Sarah, okay? They would have had to agree with God and have a natural born child. So that's where the step of faith comes in. God, I don't understand this. I don't understand logically how any of this is humanly possible. But we're going to take you at your word. That's faith. Okay? So Genesis 15 through 17 tells us some very interesting stories. Okay? And it tells us about God making and keeping a covenant in the face of our human weakness and fear and just impatience and mess. God had faith, or Abram had faith, but it wasn't flawless. Sarah had a plan, it wasn't God's, and Hagar was mistreated, but she was seen and heard. And through it all, God remains faithful. God's promises are not dependent on our performance. God's promises are not dependent on our performance, but on his character and what he says that he is going to do. So just remember, faith is simply taking God at his word. It's not simple to do, but it is a simple promise from God. Take him at his word.